Is Jesus your best friend? Hi kids, this is Auntie Mila. And our verse today is James 2:26. And it says, faith without works is dead. Isn't that interesting? Well, our story is Mrs. Faith and Mrs. Works. Mrs. Kim lived in a little town in southern Korea. And my daddy was giving some meetings there. He was preaching. My daddy was a good preacher. Oh, I loved him so much. He was my favorite preacher. He would preach. He would tell stories. Oh, I loved his stories. Well, he was preaching and he was talking, and Mrs. Kim would come to the meetings every night. And she would listen, and she was so impressed. And then she'd go home to her little house. When I grew up in Korea a long time ago, Korea had these really cute little villages with these little houses that were so pretty, so picturesque, with the straw roof. And they had their little red peppers that they would dry out on little mats. And they had their rice patties. Oh, the Korean food is so good, so delicious. And so she would go home and cook for rice for her family and vegetables and whatever else she was making. And then she'd go to the meetings in the evening. She would do that every day. And then she'd have to take her laundry down to the river and wash her laundry and beat it with a stick to get the dirt out. And then she'd come home and iron it. And then in the evening, she'd always go to the meetings. She liked the meetings so much, she sat there and listened and listened. And she thought, oh, I want Jesus as my best friend. And at the end of the meetings, she was baptized. And she was so happy. She would go home and she would talk to her little mother. And she would talk to her mother and tell her mother what she was learning. But it was really hard for her mother to walk. And so she couldn't always go to the meetings. But her daughter, Mrs. Kim, would come home and tell her mother about the meetings and read the Bible to her mother. And her mother said, oh, yes. And listen to this. And she would turn the pages and read the Bible. Well, after the meetings were all over, my daddy went home and said goodbye to everybody. And Mrs. Kim kept thinking and thinking about what she had learned at the meetings. And then she was talking to her mother one day and said, Mother, we need to tell other people about Jesus. And so that they can have peace in their hearts. And that they can be happy. And her mother said, yes, we do. And she was thinking, just how can we tell people about Jesus? And her mother said, well, I'm very old and I can't walk very good. And Mrs. Kim said, yes, I know, but we need to figure out a way. And while Mrs. Kim was down at the river doing the laundry in the river and beating the dirt out of her clothes, she would talk to the other ladies that were there. And she said, oh, we just had some wonderful meetings at the church. And I have Jesus in my heart now. And he has forgiven me of all my sins. And she was beating her clothes and washing and talking to the other ladies. Then she came home to her mother and said, I was talking to the ladies about Jesus today at the river while I was washing clothes. And her mother said, really? She said, well, that's it. That's your little mission. So this is what we'll do, daughter. And her daughter says, what? What are you talking about? She says, well, this is what we'll do. You go down to the river and wash your clothes and visit with the ladies and tell them about Jesus. I will stay home because I'm too old to go down to the river, and I will pray. I will pray and pray for you all while you're down washing clothes at the river. And Mrs. Kim said, that's a good idea, Mother. Let's do that. And so every day, almost every day, Mrs. Kim would go down to the river. She said, I'll help you with your laundry. And they said, oh, thank you. So she would be washing and beating out the dirt. That's how they did it. And meanwhile, her mother would be at home on the little undul floor. That means it's a warm floor. They build a fire under the floor, and the floor is so nice and warm. And she'd be sitting, she'd be praying, "Dear Jesus, be with my daughter." As she talks to the ladies at the river, "Please be with my daughter." So she would pray, and her daughter would be down there at the river washing clothes and talking and telling people about Jesus. And they did that. And you know what? More people said, "Well, I would like to know more." And Mrs. Kim said, "Well, come to our church." And so they came to church. And they brought in so many people into the church. And the pastor called them Mrs. Faith and Mrs. Works. Mrs. Faith was the grandma that would stay at home and pray and pray and pray. And Mrs. Works was Mrs. Kim that would go down and help ladies with their laundry. That's Mrs. Faith and Mrs. Works. Isn't that a sweet story? I want to pray. Dearest Father in heaven, help us to be more like Mrs. Faith and pray and pray and pray for our friends and loved ones. And Lord, help us to be more like Mrs. Works and tell people about you. We love you so much. For Jesus' sake, amen. Bye.